Hi, everyone. My name is Elicia COUSINS. I am an associate professor at the Education Development and Learning Support Center at Ritsumeikan APU. And today I just wanted to share a bit about one project that I helped to lead using grassroots funding called Transitions Stories of APU. And so first I'll talk a bit about the background to this project. So this project was really born out of this conversation about the difficulty of students finding a sense of belonging at university, right? We know that this is something, this university transition, right, is something that a lot of students really struggle with, and finding a sense of belonging, right, is really important when we think about our goals to promote diversity and inclusion, right, on our campuses. And APU, right, is one of the most diverse universities in Japan, with 50% domestic students, 50% international students from all over the world. And so, right, our students face unique challenges in developing a sense of belonging on our campus, right? It turns out, right, that the literature shows that there is one sort of intervention, right, that has been proven to work quite well, actually, in helping students feel a sense of belonging in university. And this intervention involves having students read and engage with stories written by other students, their peers, or their senpai, basically, stories about adjusting to university life. And reading these stories written by fellow students who've gone through the process and have emerged just fine, right? And gotten through that difficult period. When students read stories like this, written by students who share similar demographic backgrounds, can have a pretty powerful impact. This intervention comes out of some literature from psychology, right, by Walton and Cohen, who are psychologists. And essentially, this intervention aims to really sort of normalize the difficulties that students face during this time, help promote empathy among students for the idea that those around them are going through, these really challenging things that might look a little different from what they're experiencing themselves. And also to promote the idea that if you struggle during this time and you find this transition difficult, it's not somehow an indication that you're a failure or that you're somehow deficient, but rather that it's simply a common part of the process. Here's a snapshot of the original study by Walton and Cohen. They conducted this original research at a university in the US. And they were able to show that for, in particular, minority or underrepresented students, in this case, in particular, African American students who are underrepresented on US college campuses, they were able to show that this intervention had a quite significant impact on their sense of belonging, which was essentially shown through their improved sort of academic success, as well as their self-reported sense of health and well-being. So if you would like to, read this a little bit more, you can go ahead and pause the video, or go ahead and find this study and other papers written by them as well. So to implement this kind of intervention at APU, we realized we first sort of need stories and material written by our students, right? And so me and a couple other professors, Matt Gatos and Professor Peter Rue, who are also part of the Education Development and Learning Support Center, we decided to go ahead and do just that, right? Using grassroots funding to basically solicit stories, the voices of our own students, focused on this idea of what was it like, right, to transition into life in Japan, life at APU. and to provide editorial guidance for publication in an edited volume, right? With the idea that those selections from that volume could then be used later on in first-year courses for the as the basis for reading and writing interventions that can improve students' sense of belonging. So in terms of our overarching goals, right, of course, sort of the long-term vision, long-term goal here is to improve the first-year students' sense of belonging as they transition into APU. And also, right, to create sort of a tangible artifact that showcases the diversity of our student body, not just simply by country, right, which is the first thing that you would notice if you were to come to our campus, but also to help to highlight and shed light on sort of the layers of sort of difference and diversity beyond simply nationality, right? That comes out of, all the different ways, all the different prior experiences that students have before coming here, whether that be different educational experiences or, various experiences that, have to do with their intersecting social identities and how that impacts sort of how they enter into this new space. Also, right, our goal was to create a sort of a space to showcase students, creativity, creative writing, okay? Because that's something that, we don't have a lot of here at APU. Students don't really have so much of an opportunity to share their voice in this particular way. And of course, to support their communication, communicating their stories of growth and resilience, and through that, right, to support their development of sense of self within their community locally, right, at APU, but also beyond that. So what did the process actually look like? How did we implement this project? Basically, in the first phase, around September, October 2024, we worked together to prepare the faculty team, right? We worked together to really solidify what our prompt, what we were actually going to ask students to write. And based on that, we were, able to do an open call for our student editorial team because we knew we wanted students involved in curating these stories. We had about 70 applicants for this position, right, of editorial team, and we selected 4. The next stage basically consisted of us soliciting student writing. This poster you see here is just an example of one of the ways we reached out to students. And we got 25 submissions and selected 16. Okay, so the student editors, along with the faculty editors, worked together to select 16 that we knew we could work with and move forward with. And in the next couple of months, basically, the editors worked quite closely with the authors in multiple rounds of revision. Each author got to have a one-on-one consultation, 30 minutes to an hour. Sometimes some of the authors, the meetings went even longer, hour and a half, to really talk through their first draft narrative. The faculty, we essentially worked closely with the editors to train them to have these consultations with the authors, to really guide them through this process of, working with their first draft and sort of further clarifying their ideas, clarifying really what they really wanted, what story they really wanted to be telling. And so each author really got a chance to have this really nice conversation with one of our editors as they developed ideas for how to improve their piece in the next stages. And some of the authors met with their editor more than once. And beyond that, right, there was quite a bit of back and forth in terms of the authors responding to written feedback from the editors as well. And at this time, the authors were also getting their portraits taken by a photographer, a student that we had hired to do this. And the next stage, we're doing final proofreading. At this point, the faculty, we were more heavily involved in very, very closely reviewing all of the final drafts, really sort of, reviewing surface level errors and all of that to make sure the pieces were ready for publication. And then we, worked to really compile this into the final form. And then in March, we printed the books. And throughout this whole process, basically we had weekly or bi-weekly meetings with the editorial team, depending on which stage of the process we were at. Here are the student editors. Okay, there were 4 of them: Yun, Avi, Tana, and Narsu. And Chris, who's not pictured here, did photography and layout. So in terms of our outcomes, right, what we accomplished in 2024, we accomplished our goal. Okay, we successfully curated and printed the first collection of 15 student stories. We went from 16 down to 15. One author unfortunately had to drop out. And here you see the cover of the book. It kind of feels and looks kind of like a magazine if you were to hold it in your hands. And here's the table of contents. You can see the titles of all 15 pieces. And here are just a couple of examples. So here's one example, okay, of what it looks like inside. This is one author and her story. So here's what that looks like. And here's another. All right. So that's basically it. And so in terms of our next steps, we do plan to develop curricular resources based on, this first collection of stories. We plan on basically taking some excerpts and focusing in on some stories to build activities and sort of resources around for use in courses like Student Success Workshop and Multicultural Cooperative Workshop, which are required first-year courses. We plan to also make these materials available in both English and Japanese, so we will do some translation. And our longer term goal, hopefully that we will, start to do this year, to develop a second collection of student stories, okay, that include both Japanese basis and English basis stories. Because our first collection was just English basis from our international students. And so we hope to expand to include the voices of our Japanese basis domestic students as well. And that's it. If you have any questions or would like more information, you can always email me. Here is my contact information. All right. Thank you very much for listening.